Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, and welcome to the next installment in the Karn storyline. And boy, this is a good chunk of the story right here. So we're going to be experimenting with the format yet again. In this version, you're going to see me and Karn on the screen. So let me know what you think about this format in the comments when we're all done here. Now, in the previous installment of the story, Karn learned that there are great threats to the entire plane of Dominaria that Malzra, otherwise known as Urza the Planeswalker, has set himself against. Now, Karn had been transported to a battlefield where humans had been contesting and conflicting, and he was absolutely horrified. He was certain that that was the sort of widespread destruction that Urza was against, and then he found out, nope, this is just the regular struggles of man, and really when it comes to the phyrexian threat, it is of much wider scope and a much bigger problem. And Karn learns that firsthand in this installment, I should say, of the story. So, Karn is being sent back in time yet again. And as he is being sent back, he is thinking about a number of things. One of the things he's thinking about is how lonely the very beginning of the process is when the entire world kind of stops and freezes before it reverses. That's the loneliest moment of Karn's existence. Once time starts flowing backwards, he's contemplating the fact that he has been designed as a gigantic silver golem to travel way further back in time than their current experiments are allowing for. And if it's successful, much like he sees himself being unmade, because when they've gone back in time before, he actually witnessed the process of his construction, but in reverse. So he watched himself get deconstructed. And he thought about, as he's going back in time here, how the same sort of thing may happen with Master Malzra for him, where he'll kind of see all the different things that came together to make Malzra what he is. Because underneath it all, Malzra is actually Urza, pretty much the most powerful planeswalker who's ever existed. And he has set up an entire academy on the Isle of Tolaria in an attempt to thwart the Phyrexians. That's the entire purpose. So that's why these sort of temporal experiments are taking place. Now, they've managed to, as we talked about in a previous installment, they've managed to get the ability to teleport Karn to different locations in the world with a relative degree of accuracy, to the point where they can even pinpoint having him land on the ground instead of starting in the sky and plummeting downwards, which is something he definitely did not enjoy. So at this point, because they've figured out the locational aspect of time travel, they're more focused on the temporal concept of it. So for this particular experiment that they're engaged in, Karn has been instructed to essentially stay stationary until his frame is within an inch of melting, because the temporal stresses heat up Karn's frame. The further he goes back in time, the more heat damage this inflicts upon him. So basically, he needs to just stay in one spot, endure it for as long as possible before being recalled. So he is engaged in this sort of, I mean, you have to understand, this is a long time that he's being forced to stand here for. Any number of days, you know, however much time they're able to do, but roughly it's about 2 days is the max that they're going to make it. Now at the 22-hour mark, so Karn has been standing stationary, just ruminating with his own thoughts for almost a full day. And at the 22-hour mark, when it's dark, it's nighttime in the laboratory that he's in, he notices that there's movement. Somebody appears. Now here's the thing, there could be a reason for other people to come to the laboratory. The school does have cleaners who come by. You know, you have your janitor staff, essentially, who will come by and clean things up. However, this individual isn't turning the lights on. And from the way they're moving, it appears to Karn that he can, like, this individual can see in the dark. So they don't need lights, and all the janitorial staff are humans. Humans can't see in the dark. What's going on here? And then he notices something far more troubling, that this individual is taking things out of their pockets and putting them down on the table, and he realizes that's where the power stones are located. And remember, this is reverse time. So if you see somebody reaching into their pockets and putting stuff on the table, that's in reverse. That means that there's somebody in the Tolarian Academy who is stealing Power Stone, some unknown element. Now, Karn, at this point, he goes at first like he's going to trail after whoever this thief is, but then he remembers his instructions and that he has to stay absolutely stationary as part of the experiment. So, true to the experiment, he basically notes it down in his mind as something to mention once the experience is over, but he stays where he is. And another 24 hours pass, pretty much at roughly the exact same time, but a day previously, because we're going in reverse, remember. So 46 hours backwards in time is where Karn sees this thief return. And as he studies the thief, he's able to actually figure it out. He's like, wait a minute, this is Carrick. This is the individual, if you remember from previous stories, this is the individual who had been washed up on the shores of Tolaria, who Joyra had rescued and was keeping secret in a hideaway because Malzra had a policy on the Isle of Tolaria that any intruders get destroyed. No questions asked. If you're not supposed to be there, that is the end of your existence. So Joyra had hidden this individual Carrick because he's a strong, sturdy man, and Joyra was down with that, right? So basically, he's hidden off on the island. But at this point, what's happened is Joyra has actually snuck Carrick into the academy. So Karn already knew about this. Karn was aware that Joyra had snuck Carrick into the facility, but Joyra is Karn's best friend. She means very, very much to him, and he would do a lot to protect her. So from his perspective, he considered Carrick to be like a harmless indulgence for Joyra to enjoy, and he didn't want, he never brought Carrick's existence up to Baron, who is the head mage of Tolaria, or to Malzra, who's obviously the overlord of the entire Isle of Tolaria. So they had no idea that Carrick exists, but here he is. He is literally in here stealing this stuff. He's stealing plans. He's stealing power, he's stealing power stones. But why was he stealing them? And for who? He's just a castaway on the island. What's going on here? So at this point, Karn's frame is pretty hot, but he's not at the point of melting. But he feels like because this is Carrick and he's in the academy and knows who he is, doesn't know what's going on, he decides that he's going to disobey his orders and he's going to step outside of the temporal magic. And as soon as he does that, it starts to phase him back in with reality. We talked about that in previous episodes where he essentially hid underwater for a while the one time when he was phasing back in with reality, because you don't want people to see him, because these temporal experiments are secret for numerous reasons, one of which is to keep the information from Phyrexia. So basically, Karn decides he is going to tail Carrick. He follows Carrick out through some hallways, down through the Hall of Artifact Creatures, which is a very unsettling place for Karn, because this is where all of Master Malzra's previous experiments, golems and things like that, are all on display. So for Karn, it's kind of like a mausoleum, and there's a part of him that's afraid he'll end up there. So think of it like almost the equivalent of a graveyard for Karn. So he's following Carrick through this location while also unnerved. Now Carrick slid off into the secret passage that Joyra had created in and out of the school, but Karn is a gigantic silver golem, so he could not follow Carrick through this passageway. However, Karn knows the school grounds very well. He needs to, as part of what he's doing. So he heads off in another pathway, trying to catch up with Carrick, right? So Karn ends up on top of the school's walls where the guards are and things like that. He ends up there, and he sees Carrick basically slipping off into the dense woods that are around, the dense jungle that exists around the Tolarian Academy. So Karn leaps down off of the wall. Now the noise of him leaping off the wall actually echoes out into reality. So the guards hear the noise and are all looking around, but they can't see Karn because he's not fully in phase with reality. So Karn is kind of barreling through the forest, trying to catch up with Carrick and figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden he stops because he can spot ahead of him Carrick. But Carrick isn't alone. There's two others with him. Now Karn's not able to make out who these people are at all, but he is able to hear what's being said. And Carrick says to the others that the passage, he's explaining the secret passage into the Tolarian Academy. And he says, the passage is ready. Bring the full complement of negators, otherwise known as phyrexian negators. Now, Karn doesn't know what negators mean, but we do, right? So these are phyrexian negators that are being spoken of. So he says, bring a full complement of negators. The path will be open. The guards will be disposed of. Now, at that moment, right after hearing that very stunning revelation that some sort of invasion is literally set up to descend upon the Tolarian Academy, that's when the temporal magic pulls Karn all the way back to the present, right? And he's standing there steaming with hot waves of like energy coming up off of him. The time machine has actually cracked from the stress of it as well. And at this point, Karn steps forward. Now, this is against protocol. Baron even says, whoa, 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 stay back, stay back. There are contamination issues if you don't stay here for a certain amount of time. But Karn's having none of it, obviously. So he basically goes, look, there's an invasion going on. So Karn steps forward and says, there's an invasion. At the same time, Baron says, stay back. But Malzra just basically talks over him and says, oh, invasion? Who? Karn says negators. And obviously that, boom, 100%, Malzra goes into like overload mode. Like, sorry, what did you just say? Phyrexian negators? Where? Who? Give me this information. Like, lay it all out. So Karn is rapidly trying to explain everything. Now, at this point, Karn has to make the unenviable choice of betraying Joyra's secrets, right? As I mentioned before, Joyra's his biggest friend. He knows all about this stowaway Carrick, this whole thing. So he explains to Urza about Carrick that he's been stealing the Power Stones. He explains that Carrick is a castaway that Joyra has saved and actually has a bunch of books and plans from the Tolarian Academy that Joyra had been bringing out to him. Because originally Carrick lied to Joyra and told her that what he wanted to do was study enough of what they do at the Tolarian Academy that he would be knowledgeable enough that at that point, he would be able to go to Master Malzra and beg entry into the Tolarian Academy. But really underneath it all, what he wanted was the plans to things like Karn. He wanted like books about magical artifacts, anything that they could use in their attempt to invade Tolaria is what Carrick was secretly after. So basically, at this point, Urza sorted it out and goes, he's freaking out. You know what I mean? This is why he has the tell me about any intruders. We have to destroy them right away. This is the exact scenario he was terrified of, because the whole reason for all the temporal experiments is so that he can go back in time and unmake Phyrexia. That's the plan, right? So now you have Phyrexians who are here, who are literally either going to be able to ruin his concepts or steal his ideas and turn them to their own uses, because Phyrexia is all about artifacts and magic and gaining power and corruption, right? So Urza basically surmises that what must have happened is Carrick washed up on the island, but nearby they have either a large boat or a separate island where a Phyrexian ambulator was set up. And those are essentially like murky, dark pools that act as portals. You unroll them and anchor them in both realities, and it allows Phyrexians to leave Phyrexia and enter into whatever plane of existence that the ambulator has been set up in. So this is either located on a boat somewhere or an island nearby, and a whole bunch of negators have been brought over from Phyrexia. Now, negators are gigantic, hulking beasts. I mean, if you take the stats of regular magic cards, a human being's about a 1/1. Negators are like 5/5, right? So we're talking about something far more destructive and powerful than even the biggest creatures on Earth. Elephants, things like that would be nothing compared to this, right? And there's a whole complement of these coming. Now, Baron asks, when are they going to strike? And Urza says, it's too late. I can already smell them. They're already here. The invasion has begun. Phyrexians are bathed and infused with Phyrexian oil, which has a very particular scent that anybody who's trained in it, or at least, more powerful beings like Malzra, who are familiar with it, can scent it in the air. And Urza had a feeling that like there was some kind of Phyrexian problem in the school already. That's why he went off on Teferi. When we talked about, in one of the previous Teferi videos, we talked about Urza accusing him of being a Phyrexian. And that's because Carrick is a sleeper agent from Phyrexia, but with just the most subtle hint of Phyrexian oil. So it just kind of diffused around in the school. And so Urza could tell there was a phyrexian presence in the school, but couldn't pinpoint where it was. And he wasn't aware that Joyra had snuck Carrick into the school. So at this point, the invasion has already started, according to Urza. They're already here. Now, Karn doesn't need to hear anything else. In fact, he's not even listening at this point. All he can hear in his mind is Joyra. Like, his brain is screaming, Joyra, I have to get to Joyra. So Karn, with his still huge hulking, like, his frame is still superheated, right? He hasn't cooled down or anything. And he just goes slamming out the door, moving as fast. I mean, Karn isn't a super fast being, but he's hustling as fast as he can. And it feels like the longest journey ever to Karn. Every moment in a crisis like this stretches to infinity. So Karn is going as fast as he can. He gets to Joyra's room and he pounds on the door and there's no answer and the door is locked. So he leans back and he gives this massive, mighty kick, just splintering the door into just fragments, right? And for a moment, he wishes that he hadn't, because everywhere, everything is just crimson. And he looks around and he spots Joyra, or what's left of Joyra. Half of Joyra is left, and it's face down on the floor. Clearly, life has left. Like, there is no sign of life. Half of Joyra is missing, splattered all over the room. So Karn is reeling, and he looks down and he sees these bloody footprints, right? Leading over to the wardrobe. And he turns and looks at the wardrobe, and there's a set of metallic, malicious eyes staring out of the wardrobe at him for a moment before this gigantic negator leaps onto him, just leaps on top of him out of the wardrobe. It's like an insectile beast with a distended metal jaw and gigantic spikes, bone spikes coming out of it, all these tubes flowing with oil and stuff, just a magical, mechanical monstrosity that is bent on destruction, all right? So this thing is literally dripping with parts of Joyra. And then it turns to Karn and says, well, it doesn't turn to him. I mean, it's like grappling with him. And it says, disarm yourself and deactivate, you will be spared. Otherwise, you will be destroyed. Now, Karn at this point is just trying to swing at this beast, right? There's no way that he is going to back down. But the problem is Karn is a giant ponderous golem created for temporal travel, right? Whereas phyrexian negators are meant to destroy. The negation in their name is to negate life. That's the whole point of them. They're made to destroy. And they are strong and giant, and also, sadly, they're very, very fast. So their movements are way more fluid compared to Karn. So Karn is trying to swing at this negator, but the negator just moves right, just slides right behind him. And here's where it gets really bad for Karn, because remember what I said about Carrick wanting to study everything he could? He had learned how Karn works. And so there is a catch at the back, at the base of what would be Karn's skull. There's a little catch that you can flip up. And when you do, you can actually flip Karn open and access all of his interior components, right? Because remember, he was designed for time travel, not for these type of altercations. So this negator has the inside information that has already been relayed to them by Carrick. So the negator knows about this clasp at the back of Karn's skull, and it fumbles with it for a moment, but manages to snap it open. Now Karn starts to freak out at this point, right? Because he knows that everything that makes him what he is inside of him at this point. So he starts to struggle and like shake the thing off like a beast, you know, like he's just trying to like rub it off on the wall, whatever he can think to do to get this negator off him. Karn is trying, but the negator manages to slide its hand down around the power stone that belongs to Karn and slightly like shift it upwards. And as soon as it moved a little, Karn's arms kind of fell to his side like he was half paralyzed. He could barely move. But luckily for him, the negator got distracted at the last moment by the necklace that he was wearing. We talked about this in previous episodes. The necklace, what is it? The Viashino metal necklace that Joyra had given him. The negator looks at it and he basically strokes his finger down along it and says, Thran. And in response, Karn summons up all of his will and somehow manages to move past the paralysis, bellowing out Joyra and just like slamming this phyrexian away from him, right? And at this point, like Joyra's blood has spattered off the negator onto Karn, but it's like sizzling off of his frame, and Karn is pure rage. He starts slamming his fists into the negator. He grabs the necklace that Joyra had given him, and he drives it directly into the negator's head. Like, this is Thran metal, Viashino metal. It is really, really strong, much stronger than the Phyrexian's body. So he drives it into the skull of the negator, and the negator's shrieking or whatever. Karn throws the negator to the ground and just stomps down on its head, just rendering it to absolute mush, just completely obliterated, right? At this point, with the negator destroyed, all of the rage drains out of Karn, and he's just left feeling empty and sad, and in one way cursing the emotional cortex that makes him feel. Like, why can't he just be an unfeeling robot? So he's standing there staring down at what used to be Joyra, and he hears a voice from behind him saying, "They're everywhere. Baron's gone. Teferi's gone. We have to stop them." So getting a little ahead of myself. Karn turns around, and there's Malzra, fully armored up, and to Karn's eye, actually seeing Malzra in his full battle regalia, there wasn't that much of a difference between him and the Phyrexians. So Malzra says, "We can undo this. We have to get to the time machine. I have to send you back. You have to destroy Carrick before the invasion starts. It's our only hope. We're going back to the lab. I will defend it to the last moment. It doesn't matter if we lose the entire academy. It doesn't matter if the time machine gets destroyed. It doesn't matter if you get melted into a puddle. We have to stop this from happening." So, my friends, thus ends this installment of the Karn storyline. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this format, because again, I am still experimenting to figure out what I like best for the lore formats. This channel here does better when you like, comment, and subscribe. So if you're enjoying what I'm doing, do all that good stuff. If you really love what I'm doing and you want to see more lore, then go ahead and jump on my Patreon, because honestly, that is one of the biggest motivators that I have for creating more lore, is people specifically joining my Patreon because they want more lore. All right, so fan-funded channel, support it if you want to. Thanks for coming by, everybody. I'll see you all soon. Bye!